Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. As we get further into Ephesians chapter 4, we see the Apostle Paul encouraging us not to walk according to our old self, but according to the new self. And a lot of the ways that this is described is both by a negative command and also a positive command. In other words, these are things you should not be doing, and these are things you should be doing in their place. And as we go through and we read the rest of chapter 4 and even continuing on into chapter 5, we might fall into the trap of just focusing on the things that we should not do and think that we're okay because we're not doing certain things. But I would encourage all of us, as we do our reading today, to focus on the positive things, that is, the things that we should be doing. And oftentimes we think, well, we're okay because we're not doing these things, but at the same time, we're not doing the other things as well, the things that we should be involved in. For example, he says in verse 28, he who steals must steal no longer. And so we say, okay, great. I don't steal. I'm not out there, going to Walmart and nabbing things off of the shelves. I'm not stealing from my neighbor, things like that. And so check mark, I got that one right. But listen to what he says as he continues. He says, he who steals must steal no longer, but rather he must labor, performing with his own hands what is good, so that he will have something to share with one who has need. On the positive side, then, okay, yes, it's good that we're not stealing, but we're also encouraged to labor with our hands, to be busy and diligent about earning a living, not just so that we can hoard it all for ourselves, but so that we can give to the needy. And so Paul's taking us from one extreme to the other, from stealing and being selfish and taking things for ourselves to being selfless and giving the things even that we have to others. And so it takes both of those things to really live according to the new self that Paul's encouraging us to live by. We could also continue on in verse 29 where he says, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth. And so we say, yes, that's great. And literally that word, unwholesome word, means rotten word. And so we would say, yes, I don't let any rotten words come out of my mouth. I'm very careful not to say curse words or use profanity. And that's good. And that's definitely should be the case. But we also need to look at the positive part of this command and say that we need to be careful with the words that we do speak. We may not be using rotten words, but the words that we do use, are we using them selectively? He goes on to say, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. And so, yes, it's good not to speak rotten words, but we also should be speaking words of edification, words of grace, words that are selective and only for the need of the moment, and being careful in the way that we speak. So we need to listen to that part of it. And then he says in verse 31, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. And again, we might say, yes, check mark, I got that down. I'm not being contentious. I'm not I'm not a rabble rouser. I'm not trying to cause a bunch of problems. But he continues in verse 32, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God in Christ has also forgiven you. And so we also have to have the right heart. And we also have a heart of forgiveness, of tenderness towards others, of kindness. It's not just enough to be neutral, but to actually exemplify these positive things. And then, of course, borrowing from our reading tomorrow, we can also continue this thought as he goes on and talks about there must be no, verse 4, there must be no filthiness and silly talk or coarse jesting, which are not fitting. And so definitely we would say, yeah, I'm not going to be involved in jokes that are dirty or filthy or inappropriate. But he goes on, he says, but rather giving of thanks. And so how much does our speech comprise of us giving thanks? Thanks to God, primarily, We're giving thanks to other people for the good things that they've done for us, but especially towards God. How much of our speech is really towards giving God thanks? And not just giving God thanks directly to him, but saying words of thanksgiving to God to others. As people notice certain good things that come into our lives, do we say, yes, I thank the Lord that this has been brought into my life. And so in all of these things, or at least most of these things, we can see both a negative and a positive commandment. Things not to do, but things we should do in their place. And I would encourage us as we read today to really focus on those positive things. And of course, if we need to let go of those negative things, of course we should do that. But once we have those things down, let's look at those positive things and say, you know what, these are some things I want to implement in my life. And I'm not just going to think that it's good enough that I've gotten rid of these negative things, but I also want these positive things being expressed in my life as I interact with others, as I interrelate with God, and as I live this life in general. So these are some things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.